All right, everyone at home, can you hear us?
Yes.
Fabulous. So welcome to Rekindle the Garden. One of my favorite parts about this class is that we've been beginning every class or concluding it like we did last week with a hymn from our hymnal that allows us to sort of reimagine or rethink what exactly that hymn might mean through the lens of creation care or eco-theology. We've been discussing that concept the last 2 weeks. The first week was led by me, and we learned a little bit about farming. And then last week was by Dr. Brown from and folks with Heritage Presbyterian. But both weeks, we were discussing the intersection of faith and creation. Now, there's a lot of people that are either on the call or in this room that remember our definition of eco-theology or creation care. Is there someone that would like to maybe state that in their own words? Oh yeah, come on, volunteers.
Oh, God.
There is no wrong answer.
Jackie,
I'll say something.
Please,
Jackie will tell you.
do it.
Okay. Well, eco would make me think of the planet and all above and below us and everything, the eco, the world, the planet. And theology would be like God. God gave us this wonderful planet. So that would be I would think it's a wonderful thing.
Who all thinks Jackie's right? Yeah, Jackie, this is your class, Dr. Stead. Come on, that was beautifully done. Exactly, we are thinking and talking about the relationship between creation, nature, what's above, below, within us, right? And God. That's exactly what eco-theology is. And when we hear phrases like creation care or earth care or eco-theology, they are all really talking about that same thing. That relationship, that intersection. You will hear a lot of people use the word intersection to describe that. You will hear me more often than not use the word relationship. I am big in relationship. Why? Because I feel strongly that all of our biblical writers discuss intentionally the relationship between creation and God. When we were created, in many of the creation stories that we'll explore today, there is a divine, sacred, holy relationship. Now, today is Christ the King Sunday, the last Sunday of the liturgical year. And so because of that, we're going to sing All Creatures of Our God and King, fitting, right, for our opening hymn. I'm going to do my best to make it so that our folks at home can also see the words. You probably know a lot of these words already, but, oh, wait, I did that wrong. Just a second. Share content.
Oh, so good at this. The challenge.
It's for people to be tech savvy that have not been tech people.
All right,
Yeah, you have to
change
get it right
view,
away to
content, boom. Look
There it
at that. I know it's kind of small, all of you at home, just if it, I'll give you 15 seconds while I go find the right key on the piano to just Google All Creatures of Our God and King. That might make it a bit more sizable for you, but because it's such a long hymn, and in the handout that I gave everyone here, there's 6 verses. How many are online? 5. I say we only do you want to do all 5? You want to do 4?
Yeah.
4.
4. We'll do the first 4, and let's see if I can get the key right. Oh no, this is a
Later.
sharp. Let's see here. All right. All right, that sound good? That's a D. Okay. As we sing this, let's just not think about, I'll go back and hit it. I'm talking, sorry. As we sing this, let's not just think about, hey, we have great memories about this hymn. We love this hymn. Let's think about, as Jackie said,
No.
that relationship between God and creation. Here's the D. All creatures are God and King. Lift up your voice and with us sing. silver gleam, sing praises, hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. Oh, brother, and rain, you nurture gifts of fruit and grain. Hallelujah, hallelujah. Sister, water flowing clear, make music for your Lord to hear. Sing praises, hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Oh, brother, fire so warm and bright, chase off the shadows of the night. Hallelujah, hallelujah. And I pray, oh, for such blessings on our way. Sing praises, hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Fourth verse. All for God, all pain or sorrow, hallelujah, hallelujah. Set your burdens and your fears, so in the midst of tears, sing praises, hallelujah.
Hallelujah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Everyone's so proud of you.
You know what I got from this?
Yeah.
Oh, I would love to hear what you got from this.
I was sung this my whole life, and what I got from looking at the words this time is it includes everybody. If God's the Father, and the brother, the sister, the mother, and then Christ the Son, they're all included in this, caring for the world, caring for our ecosystem.
Wonderful.
We all have a part to play.
I love that. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the best line, I think, is unfold such blessings on our way. So it's not always immediate, it's as we go through life.
Right. It's constant.
Verse 3, that you can find that in verse 3, unfold such blessings on our way. Thank you. Are there other reflections or thoughts upon singing this hymn together this morning intentionally through the lens of eco-theology or of creation care or thinking about our relationship with the earth? Yes, please.
One thing I noticed is that it includes not only the things we have control over, but the things we have no control over, like the sun, the wind, the weather, that it's the whole thing.
That is so beautiful. Tying that back to our first class, we were thinking about dominion.
Yeah.
And what we do or do not have power over. I love that. I love how we can hold that in tension. And then we can sing this liturgically, both here and in worship. That's so moving. Maybe one more? Any others? I don't want to shortchange this. Yes, please.
I think it's kind of interesting that we didn't sing the fifth verse,
Yeah.
but it talks about death as part of the whole process. It's not just,
Right.
and not to say that there isn't wonderful things about life, but it just says this is part of it too, And you most gentle sister death, waiting to hush our final breath. And since Christ our light has pierced your gloom, fair is the night that leads us home. I like that that's included. I don't know. I feel like it's just sort of completes the circle.
Yes, that's a good observation.
Well, I like it that it covers forgiveness and grieving and Christ bearing both our burdens and helping us with our fears. I mean, it's got a lot of stuff in there.
Yeah.
Nurture, and then it says nurture gifts of fruit and grain. So that's part of our responsibility as we nurture the gifts that we have through creation.
Oh, absolutely. So when we think of fruit and grain, what's a liturgical worshipful act that we do together with fruit and grain?
Eucharist.
Communion.
Communion, Lord's Supper. Absolutely.
Right.
So we are now expanding our concept of eco-theology into sacraments and how that relationship binds us together. Right. This is,
Right.
we just so you know, we just sang. Do you have a copy here?
There's a bunch of them.
Okay, yeah. And it's both our opening hymn, but also sort of as an exercise that allows us to, you know, intentionally expand the way that we view these things. Not just, hey, we sing it on Sunday. We're not just, hey, creation care is, you know, put in the garden. That it's,
Right.
it's much more inclusive. And just to kind of close, unless somebody else has something they'd like to say, is that Bill Brown last week discussed this as part of evangelism, right? Eco-theology is part of, you know, spreading the good news. And when we sing hymns like this in worship regularly, we are instantly just as, you know, living into that, spreading the good news of creation, of the love of Christ, of fair the night that leads us home.
Mhm.
Right. I mean, in all of our creation stories, there ends up being some sort of completion, resolution, right? And what's so moving is that for us as Christians, is we also have resurrection. And you know, how fair is that night when we know and when we believe that there is resurrection as a part of that. Anything else?
That's beautiful.
Did you say
I
something?
was wondering how all of the creatures sing. I know birds sing, but I'm trying to imagine, you know, like an iguana singing.
Moo. So I don't have an answer for you, but I can tell you when an answer will be given. And that is during the 4 o'clock service on Christmas Eve. Because one thing that we're doing with our children during Advent is asking them if there was one animal that you would like to have, or that you wish had been at the manger scene that's not there, what would it be?
Oh.
Right? So, you know, raptor, or, you know, who knows what it'll end up being, right?
Interesting.
Yeah, unicorn. Like, who knows what we end up getting, right? But then, hush, this is a secret. So I know this is being recorded, but still, we're collecting that info, and then that's going to be woven into the little sermon that I wrote on Christmas. And then, so I can't answer that, but our children can. Right?
It may sound like the Tower of Babel. Each in its own tone.
There you
I
go.
can imagine dogs howling and.
Oh, yeah.
crying, you know.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, I've never thought of that as singing to God, though.
Yeah. Dogs, absolutely. Well, thank you all so much for this. We have been studying for the last 2 weeks, eco-theology, creation care. And this is a 5-week class. And next week it actually takes a break because Dr. Ben will be here next Sunday, walking us through the music that we will sing on the 5th of December. And so right now the plan is that he'll be here, and it will be very moving, and it will allow us to both learn about the history of the music that we'll sing, but also to best sort of appreciate it in the moment when we're able to be there and worship. We will then rejoin this series on December 5th, when we will have Dr. Cindy Brown with us. She is in charge of all of the gardens at the Smithsonian Institute. I'm meeting with her next week. And the plan when we spoke over the summer was that she would be with us over Zoom. There is some discussion that may not be the case. She may come in, but we'll see. I don't want to promise anything, but we're talking about how to make it as interactive as possible. But she will discuss just the spiritual experience that she has, or that she has experienced others have while immersed in a garden. And again, right, according to one of our creation stories, God's initial idea of what creation would look like is a garden. And then we'll conclude talking about some things that we can do here on the 12th of December. Some ways we can live out our eco-theology here, or follow up on some of the questions we might have. That's half the fun. Because this, what we're going to do for the first half of this course actually is half the fun. And that is that Dr. Bill Brown wrote a book published by Oxford University Press. So, you know, it's pretty well respected. And that discusses the 7 pillars of creation. 7 different stories of creation found in the Bible. Now, Dr. Brown, who was with us last week, who again was here because of work he did with the Reformed Institute and a partnership that we had with Heritage Presbyterian, he is an Old Testament Hebrew scholar. And so his 7 pillars all come from the Old Testament. There is no Greek, no New Testament pillars or stories of creation. And what he argues, what he posits, what he speaks around the world about is that according to ancient Hebrew wisdom is that there was not just Genesis 1 or 2, is that all of these creation stories were sort of in the minds of scholars, in the minds of rabbis as they did their best to sort of articulate, to preach, to teach how that, again, relationship with creation, sacred relationship was with the divine and with the children of Abraham, I guess, right? And so I'm going to list what all of those are, and then there are Bibles on our table, so we can even look some of them up. Some of these we all know already and won't require us looking them up, but some might need a little work, all right? So the first, he lists 7, and I was wrong. I told you that Noah was one that he mentions, and he does not actually mention Noah or the Great Flood, so forgive me, that was wrong. The first 2 are Genesis 1, and Genesis 2, exactly. So Genesis 1, of course, is the God creates over 6 days. And on the 7th day, God does what?
Rest.
Yes, exactly. And hence comes our concept of Sabbath, right? And the 7th day being the Lord's day, right? Because the Lord on the 7th day rested. We all are pretty familiar with this story. Does anyone want to say anything about Genesis 1? Or do we want to jump to some of these we might be able to spread? Second one is Genesis 2, right? And there's a little bit of Genesis 1 in there, but mainly Genesis 2. And that, of course, is Garden of Eden, right? That is God molding from clay and breathing God's breath into that clay, into that Adamah, the Spirit of God. And then, of course, from that Adam, a rib is removed to create Eve, and then we have the fall and all of that. So that is the second creation story. Now, the third creation story ends up coming from Psalm 104, verses 24 through 30. Would anyone like to look up Psalm 104, verses 24 through 30? And then read it aloud, please.
24 through 30?
Yes, please. In particular, those 6. And then we can discuss and reflect on what we think about those.
O Lord, how manifold are your works. In wisdom you have made them all. The earth is full of your creatures. Yonder is the sea great and wide. Creeping things innumerable are there. Living things both small and great. There go the ships and Leviathan that you formed to sport in it. These all look to you to give them their food in due season. When you give to them, they gather it up. When you open your hand, they are filled with good things. When you hide your face, they are dismayed. When you take away their breath, they die and return to their dust. When you send forth your spirit, they are created, and you renew the face of the ground.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. What were some things we noticed about that story and creation and our relationship with and to it? And the next one we read will intentionally have some of those same elements. So just keep those words in mind as we reflect a little bit.
Well, the passage seemed like there was a cycle that was being explained.
I love it.
Cyclical. in its word.
Seems to have a lot to do with the sea too, rather than.
Leviathan,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Ships and the sea and.
Yeah,
Leviathan, the great monster, and, yeah,
yeah.
what if the kids want Leviathan at the?
That would be fun. We, this group should totally like flood the pool with Leviathan. That's a great idea. Other thoughts, Just want to make sure I'm not missing any hands raised. Was there a partner in creation? Ooh, the Spirit.
The spirit, yeah, I breathe the spirit into them.
I like that. So there's a parallel.
When you send forth your spirit, they are created.
May someone please volunteer to read Proverbs 8, in particular, verses 22 until the end. And you know what? I'll just give somebody else the next one so that you can look it up. And that's Job 38. But for right now, may someone please find Proverbs chapter 8, verses 22 until the end.
Okay, let's see.
22.
I've got it.
Go ahead.
Yeah, please.
This is the gifts of wisdom,
Mm.
and wisdom's part in creation. The Lord created me at the beginning of his work, the first of his acts of long ago. Ages ago, I was set up at the first, before the beginning of the earth. When there were no depths, I was brought forth, when there were no springs abounding with water. Before the mountains had been shaped, before the hills, I was brought forth. When he had not yet made earth and fields, or the world's first bits of soil. When he established the heavens, I was there. When he drew a circle on the face of the deep, when he made firm the skies above, when he established the fountains of the deep, when he assigned to the sea its limit, so that the waters might not transgress his command. When he marked out the foundations of the earth, then I was beside him like a master worker, and I was daily his delight, rejoicing before him always, rejoicing in his inhabited world and delighting in the human race. And now, my children, listen to me. Happy are those who keep my ways. Hear instruction and be wise, and do not neglect it. Happy is the one who listens to me, watching daily at my gates, waiting beside my doors. For whoever finds me finds life and obtains favor with the Lord. Those who miss me injure themselves. All who hate me love death.
Mm. The spirit and the value of wisdom.
Wisdom was there.
Wisdom is a big metaphor.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I feel like-
Absolutely. So wisdom was a partner in creation, according to this creation story, right? Before even left there in the beginning, right? Or at in the beginning. Before let there be light. Before any of that, there was wisdom.
It almost sounds
Hester,
like-
please, yes.
I'm sorry.
No.
It almost sounds like, and I'm reading the New International Version.
Yeah.
But it says, before the mountains were settled in place, before the hills, I was given birth, instead of, I think, given forth is the version that was read. It almost sounds like not just like an actual person, like another creation, like an angel being there with, as a partner, not just a metaphor, but almost as if they were there.
Mm.
But that's from this version, and there's a couple of other references that imply that it wasn't just an idea that was there, and not just a metaphor, but an actual creature that was there, which makes it seem a little,
Jacob, I was
Sandy,
wondering,
yes.
the connections with the beginning of the book of John is what struck me.
Oh, Sandy, tell us more, please. Unless you don't want to, but please tell us more.
In the beginning.
was the word, yeah.
Should we jump to that, Sandy? Is that fair? Can somebody who has not just looked up Job 1, or you know what, I heard some folks in this room, Sandy, actually say the words to John 1. So
In the beginning was the Word,
And the Word was with
and the
God.
Word was with God.
And the Word
The word
was God.
And the Word was God.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Everything that was made through him.
Yeah.
Now, Bill Brown does not, Old Testament scholar, right, does not include that in his 7 pillars of creation. But I have a very hard time not thinking that that is a creation story in our sacred text, especially in light of what was just read and discussed in this room. Right?
Yes.
And we can revisit that one in a bit, but Sandy, that's actually on my note here, is to make sure that we go back to John 1, because that's not, again, one that Bill Brown references, but definitely is a creation story, and is, what theologians since John wrote that have just, have been so amazed and perplexed at the incredible poetry and wisdom that he put into creating that gospel with that opening, right? Others include a family tree of Jesus, but what if that story, the creation story, is the family tree of Jesus? Pretty moving, right?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. Any other thoughts on that one? Thank you so much for reading.
Oh, yeah, and I would
Please.
just say that, somewhere along the line in Sunday school class, I learned about the notion of the pre-existent Christ.
Mm.
Oh,
That
yeah.
Christ was
Always there.
always there and came in human form, but Christ always existed. And if that's true, maybe this is who we're talking about. I don't know.
That occurred to me too.
Oh, yeah.
Well, we just, so we read from, that was from Proverbs.
Yeah.
And, one thing that we learn about Jesus is that Jesus was pretty well versed in those Hebrew texts.
Yeah.
Jesus was not well versed in the epistles, right? Jesus knew the prophets and knew, the Torah. And so when we hear Jesus preach or describe the kingdom of God, these are the metaphors, these are the textual root from which he preaches and from which he teaches. And so I love that. It's beautiful. Joanne, you're pulling your mask down to say something. What is it?
Not really. I'm gonna go out on a limb. Doesn't this all depend on how you actually define salvation?
Tell us more.
Well, that we live in salvation now.
Sure.
That we live in this sacred space, that we are so part of God's creation now and in the forever after. So it's, that's a concept I think that we need to take more hold of.
In other words, salvation isn't out there, it's right here.
Yeah, it's here and now and there and forever.
Yeah.
So.
Well, that is what's so interesting about the time of year we find ourselves in, right? Which is Advent, right? I mean, it's Christ the King today, but soon it's Advent. And what do we celebrate? What are we in preparation for during Advent? Yes, the birth of Christ, but that second coming, right? Christ has died, Christ is risen, Christ will come again, right? And so in Advent, we are preparing ourselves for both, right? To celebrate the Son of Righteousness entering the world, God in flesh, but we're preparing ourselves for when that, we like to think, joyful day of when Christ comes again. Anyway, Sandy, look what you've done. You've led us into New Testament truths. Thank you so much for that comment. Who has Job 38? Yes, please.
Where do I start?
So we find, if I may, we just from the very beginning. So Job has been giving, when we entered this text, Job has been giving God the business, if you will. Right? Hey, why me? Why? And this is God's response. Just like go to a brick, because this is God saying, hey, who are you talking to? But in a pretty poignant way for this. So,
Yeah, really.
The first 10 verses, I'm sure.
Of Job.
So chapter 38,
38.
chapter 38, verse 1 through whenever you feel like stopping, because we'll get the point.
Then the Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind. Who is this that darkens counsel by words without knowledge? Gird up your loins like a man. I will question you, and you shall declare to me. where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? Tell me if you have understanding. Who determined its measurements? Surely you know. Or who stretched the line upon it? On what were its bases sunk? Or who laid its cornerstone? When the morning stars sang together and all the heavenly beings shouted for joy? Ouch!
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't often get to hear God talk about what God has done, right? We might see it, we might hear it from other people. But what's pretty neat about this is God saying, wait a second, you know.
Who are you to question me?
And because of what I've done as God.
It's almost like saying, go away, I'm in charge.
Yeah, you listen to me. I'm not learning from you. You're learning from me.
Well, and so partner that up with the next one, right? Which will be from Ecclesiastes. But we have, there are many different schools or libraries within our Bible, right? Schools that come from, or texts that come from different traditions. And often, just one second, often Job and Ecclesiastes are partnered together as sort of an alternative wisdom text. Yes, go ahead.
I have a question about
Please.
this text.
Which one?
Job,
Yeah,
I'm reading it, he seems angry.
God or Job?
God, it's
Yeah.
God saying like, it's just an angry, Job's been through all this stuff and he's like, oh, why are you doing this to me? God says, because I can. And he seems sort of like, and were you there? I mean, it just seems very angry to me. It doesn't seem reassuring.
Loving?
Yes, yes. That's the Old Testament, so.
Well, sure, but so was this, right? I mean, I would lift up that statement. It's Old Testament with, so too was wisdom
Yes.
at the same, before anything, was created. And tying that in with the eternal logos. I mean, we are people of the living word, and we gather around that every Sunday to worship, to proclaim it, to interpret it, to send it forth. It's often how we hold those things in tension, knowing that God is a relatable God, knowing that God intentionally became in flesh to experience the same emotions that we experience. There's a lot of our own emotions that we have to hold in tension as well. But anyway, no. This is definitely, you're right, Hester. This is definitely God sort of responding to Job, who for 30 some odd chapters, like I said, had been giving God the business. But reminding not just Job, but anyone who reads it about the works of creation that God has. So I'm gonna skip ahead because I've got a lot of other stuff and we're doing this. I love this. I'm overjoyed. But Ecclesiastes chapter 12, verse 1 through 7 is often these two are Bill Brown, are Job, the Job passage, and then this Ecclesiastes I care about.
Versus what?
Ecclesiastes chapter 12, verses 1 through 7.
Remember your Creator in the days of your youth, before the days of trouble come and the years draw near, when you will say, I have no pleasure in them. Before the sun and the light of the moon and the stars are darkened, and the clouds return with the rain. In the day when the guards of the house tremble, and the strong men are bent, and the women who grind cease working, because they are few. And those who look through the windows, when the doors on the street are shut, and the sound of the grinding is low, and the sun rises up at the sound of a bird, and all of the daughters of song are brought low. When one is afraid of heights, and terrors are in the road, the almond tree blossoms, the grasshopper drags itself along, and desire fails, because all must go to their eternal home, and the mourners will go about the streets. Before the silver cord is snapped, and the golden bowl is broken, and the pitcher is broken at the fountain, and the wheel broken at the cistern, and the dust returns to the earth as it was, and the breath returns to God who gave it. Vanity of vanities, says the teacher, always vanity.
So we've had Genesis 1 and 2. we have had these wisdom texts, right? From Proverbs and then tying it into even the New Testament. And now we have sort of this relationship, right? This Job text with Ecclesiastes. What are our initial reactions to that creation story, that pillar, according to Bill Brown? Well, according to you, what's your reaction? But Bill Brown is who says it's a pillar of creation.
Oh, okay.
How is it pillar of creation? I'm sorry. I see the end.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, I mean, using the word creator doesn't make it a creation story, but like, I guess the almond tree philosophy, but I don't really see how is it, and where in your version it says vanity at the end, in mine it says meaningless. Everything is meaningless, says the teacher. I can change it.
Oh, yeah, definitely reading different translations of these 100% sort of changes the way that we interpret it, right? I mean, I would actually say that,
Life is hard.
yeah, absolutely, well, and what does that mean? And how can we live that out as people of faith, especially people of faith who, when this was written, potentially are in exile, knowing that they have a divine relationship with the earth?
So it sounds to me like, it's like, okay, don't worry about today, just think about the beginning and think about the end. It's like, oh, geez. That's no hope, or no, there's no comfort in that at all, to me. Just remember the beginning before there was trouble, and remember in the end it all goes away anyway. So it's like, so my whole life is misery and I mean nothing,
Yeah.
Hence it partnered with Job.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, yes.
I think a little bit of what you said, it's never about me, it's about everybody else. It's about how the rest of how we serve and do, it's about others. Not in our lifetime, but for those that came before and those that come after. So it's much more about other people.
I like that.
Yeah.
I like that.
So, because I just looked at Ecclesiastes 11, sometimes it helped me to see the whole.
Of course.
Whatever,
Yeah.
and that seems more,
Oh, she's in the left.
yeah, I switched to.
No, sometimes that helps the context.
Yeah, so I mean, 11 just starts to talk, it's a much more, I just did a quick glance, it's, shop your grain across the sea, invest in seven ventures, clouds are full of water, they pour on the earth, whether a tree falls to the south or to the north and the place where it falls. You don't know how it happens, but you don't understand the work of God. So your seed in the morning and in the evening, let your hands not be idle. For you do not know which will succeed. I don't know, it just seems a little less doom and gloom. It's still not as positive, but like light is sweet and it pleases the eyes to see the sun. However many years anyone may live, let them enjoy them all. But let them remember the days of darkness, for where there will be many. Everything is to come is meaningless.
Yeah.
You who are young, be happy while you are young, and your heart give you joy. Yeah. God will bring you judgment, so then banish anxiety from your heart and cast out your trouble. I don't know, it just seems a little bit like setting up like, okay, these things happen. It's not as, because if you just take, it seems to me, you just take 12, it's like, whoa, real dark. If you add in the 11, it's like, okay, there's a preface to that.
Sure,
So
sure.
that's, I don't know, just.
Well,
I think you have to read a bigger context.
Yeah, I mean, and one would have to do that for everything.
Oh, yes. but-
Right, for all of these things that
Yeah.
we are
Right.
traveling along with Dr. Brown to
Yeah.
kind of name, even the ones that we've liked, right? But I think I have two responses. The first is pastoral, and then the second is prophetic. And the pastoral response is almost Genesis 2 uplifting, right? That's for each of us to interpret. But I mean, but it's kind of doom and gloom. Is we have this great chance, and it's not there anymore.
That's how we blow it.
you know?
We blew it.
And yeah, and so that's one of them that's, that's one of these creation pillars, if you will, that's much more broadly at least accepted. Potentially that's because of the location it's at, right? Potentially it's, I mean, the narrative's pretty riveting, right? But my prophetic piece would be, let's take a look at John 21 verses 1 through 7, which is new city, heaven and earth.
Okay.
And just to kind of conclude this, we're again this is not a Bill Brown. This is Revelation. This is the last book of the Bible, chapter 21, verses 1 through 7. But this is. Jackie, go ahead.
Jacob, could you reference that scripture again, please?
Oh, absolutely. I'm sorry. I'm going quick. This is Revelation. This is the last book of the Bible. This is in the New Testament, so it's Greek. This is not Bill Brown's work, but this is me raising a new creation story for us to hold alongside these others. And so this is again Revelation chapter 21, verse 1 through 7. And I'm pretty sure this is creating a new heaven, new earth, new Jerusalem.
Yeah,
It is.
Would anyone like to read those 7 verses?
Somebody quick, we had.
Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth. For the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and the sea was no more.
Mm.
And I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, "See, the home of God is among mortals. He will dwell with them. They will be his peoples, and God himself will be with them, and he will wipe every tear from their eyes. Death will be no more. Mourning and crying and pain will be no more, for the first things have passed away."
Thank you.
Yeah, is that enough?
That's perfect.
Amen.
Right?
The cheerful stuff.
And so this is another creation story, right? Of new creation. Again, thinking about the second coming and where we're at in the liturgical year, that Bill Brown does not include as a pillar of creation, but I would say is another one of these stories, these sacred myths, right? These amazing pieces from our sacred textual history that spiritual ancestors of ours have gathered around to worship and to study and to pray for centuries, for millennium, that are not only tied to creation, but remind us about our sacred relationship to a new city, right? Do we open in the garden and we end in the city? What does that mean? It's a great question. Are there questions about that before we spend the next 15 minutes on a PowerPoint about how this ties into worship? Joanne?
I see this, as we've read these passages, I think more of a process than I do of a happening. Well, I don't know if I can explain it, but, process that every day is, and we learn more and we evolve through God's plan.
Mhm.
Kind of, yeah, evolutionary through God's plan alone. But I don't think anything is, God is good. His mercy is everlasting.
Mhm.
So I think that overrides the happening so that we understand the happening through Jesus.
Beautiful.
And I think it also suggests why we come together and worship. Nobody lives a life without bumps in the road, sometimes deep valleys. But, that we are in the process of recreating not only our lives, but the lives of the people that we interact with. In
Amen.
our community, our beloved community.
Right.
That's why the metaphor body of Christ works so well. So I now am going to do my best. Let's make this tech work. To run us through a quick PowerPoint regarding how this ties into how we worship annually.
Here we go.
Can we all see this? Whoopsies. Let's go here. All right, Rekindle the garden. That's us. Now,
I love that.
we are at Christ the King Sunday, which is the last Sunday of the liturgical year. What is the liturgical year? Well, we have cycles. We actually just brought up cycles, a cyclical process in some of our creation stories. Right? These cyclical processes we see all the time in our lives, right? I mean, it's, hey, school starts up in the fall and ends in May or June or whatever school. Exactly. You know, we celebrate Christ the King. The last Sunday of the liturgical year, always right before Advent begins. And why does the liturgical year start with Advent? Because it allows us to prepare the way for the light of Christ to enter into our world. You know, when is Easter? Always in the spring. You know, and these things aren't only in the liturgical year. These things happen throughout all of our lives. And there's really, it's, you know, the last 2 weeks have been probably peak color. I don't know if that's a term used in Virginia, but I mean, where we have seen that annual cycle vividly in the last few days and weeks here in our lives. So this is one take of what the liturgical year looks like. You see a few colors, right? And you see ordinary time, green, and we see these purple times and then these white times, right? And so what's amazing about our time together, our sacred time, our liturgical worship time, is that we have these periods of ordinary time. And they wrap ourselves and are entwined with these periods of extraordinary time. That, of course, would be Lent, Advent, the seasons of Christmas and Easter. And they sort of do this unique, fun cycle that goes throughout our lives, right? This not only happens to us throughout the liturgical year, but also reminds us of our own lives. There are times when things are extraordinary. There are times when things are not so extraordinary, and they're just sort of normal. This is our year, right? I'm sure many of us know this, but we have Advent, and we usually wear the color what? Purple in Advent. Because purple and Lent both have, or excuse me, Advent and Lent both are purple, the color of royalty. Lent is a far older church season than Advent. So Lent actually was the first church season. And then we have after Advent, the season of Christmas, white, the season of Easter, and they're white because they're pure. That's when Christ enters the world. That's after resurrection. And you can see the months in this image. The next image is a little bit more color, right? Because let's just start here with Christ the King. Today, you'll see our paraments are actually white because we're honoring Christ, the reign of Christ, Christ's omnipotent power in the world. Advent, blue. Some churches have already made the shift to using blue as the color of Advent, not purple, for a few reasons. One is because blue is more a color of preparation as opposed to penitence, right? Like Lent. Also, purple is the color of royalty. It allows Lent to remain its older, more ancient, more royal, if you will, liturgical season. And it gives Advent its own thing, being a bit more hopeful. We obviously have the pink Sunday when we light that third pink candle in the Advent wreath. And the third Sunday is pink. Why? Because it allows us to be joyful. There's a little bit of joy in that part, in that anticipation for a birth. And then we have the 2 seasons of Christmas. Excuse me, the 2 weeks of Christmas, the season of Christmas before we get to ordinary time. Transfiguration, purple, Easter, and then red for Pentecost, Trinity Sunday, ordinary time, All Saints. For another class, I can lead us all through if we have any interest in like the actual history of all of these different festivals and church seasons. But Lent is by far the oldest, and Lent used to be mainly just like a week, but then it became sort of like a 40-day fast, right? Like what we do for Noah, I think Jesus in the wilderness, 40 days, to prepare people to become baptized. And then historically, Easter was the day when people will be baptized. This sort of gives us that cycle more, this image, right? It reminds us sort of like, it almost looks like a DNA double helix, right? You know, but that's how our life twirls, spirals, if you will, and is connected to the liturgical year. Obviously, we just brought up Lord's Supper, but when we're thinking about creation in that spiral, right? You know, we have that image of the leaves. Think about how the seasons are intertwined in this. Think about how our lives and what the texts that we read are intertwined with that. right? We do, I mean, like, I don't think this is sacrilege, but Jesus, the light of the world, enters the world when it's the darkest and the days are the shortest, right? We celebrate resurrection when? In the spring. We got all these beautiful flowers, right? And we honestly celebrate All Saints Day when it's getting a little darker, and we're thinking more about that. So anyway, we've mentioned, I think this table mentioned the Lord's Supper, but we have two, right? We have two sacraments that definitely can remind us about creation when we worship, Lord's Supper and baptism. This is my fun picture of baptism. Look at that dove, right? Jesus was baptized in a river, right? We here obviously don't baptize folks that don't. But the Presbyterian Book of Order, the way that one obtains the water for a baptism, does anyone know? What is it? How do we get the water?
Don't they go to the river that Jesus was baptized in?
So that's a great question. So Jesus was baptized in the Jordan, right? And actually, there's a member here who gave me some water that's in my office that I haven't shown anybody from the Jordan River. Pretty cool. I've never been there. But our water for baptism in the Presbyterian Church is not from the River Jordan. It can be. And to be very honest, this might be sacrilege, but if I'm ever in Israel, someone's rebaptized in the Jordan. So we're all on the same page, right? But anyway, it's actually intentionally, and get this, think about this through a creation care lens. It's intentionally water that is local to the source and local to the community into which one will be baptized. So the idea is not that the water is holy. The idea is not that the water comes from a sacred location, but that water into which a child is being, or an adult is being baptized, is native to the community into which they are being baptized, right? So that's pretty powerful. It's pretty moving.
Where do we get our water?
We get our water from the tap.
That's what I thought. That's what I would have thought, but I was like, well.
Absolutely, right? And honestly, I don't know where our aquifers go. I wish I did. That'd be fun for another lesson. And obviously, communion.
Just be the watershed is what it is.
100%.
There you go.
Right? And which again, when one wants to think about the action component to this work, how should we care for the Chestnut watershed? When we know that is the water, not only that we're drinking, right? When we're not in church, but into which we are baptized. I mean, this just, I keep saying children. Last Sunday, I baptized a child, and what's amazing is his father had been baptized 2 weeks before. What an amazing month for that family, right? And we use Chesapeake Bay water for both of those. Right? Communion, our wine, our bread, our juice does not have to come from Israel. I love your thought about the Jordan River. But what's fun is that most for us, our bread until recently had come from Great Harvest, which is a local bread from the area. And then our juice usually is Welch's or something along those lines. But think about what that means for original followers of Jesus. Right? Every time they ate, every time they drank, they could remember not only this, they could remember not only the Lord's Supper, the Last Supper, but they could remember the relationship they have with the divine. They were most likely a whole lot closer physically to the food with which they ate than we certainly are today. Right? Elements of an ordered service. I had a little fun with this. Okay, so we're going to whip through this in about the next 4 minutes. But when we think about a church service, Reformed church service, any here at Westminster or any Presbyterian church, they're all about what we do with the living word. We are people of the word, right? We gather around the word, we seal all of those things. And so we gather around the word. That's the opening of the church service. We then proclaim the word, right? We read from the Bible. In every single worship service, there is scripture read. It is then interpreted. It does not say it has to be by a sermon, but we interpret the word together, right? We then respond to the word. Think of how we respond. And we then seal it in those baptisms, and then we send forth that word, right? So the living word, right? The living word, which is Jesus, The living word, which in John 1 has been alongside wisdom before creation even took place. That is that same word, right? So when we think about what that means in everything that we do liturgically, here, I'll go back to that page. We're gathering around that. We're proclaiming that. We are interpreting it. We're responding, we're sealing it, and then we're sending it forth, right? We are sending forth that same wisdom. We are sealing that same, in the beginning was the Word was God, the Word was with God. We are interpreting and responding to that every time, every Sunday when we gather. That is the exact same thing that we are gathering around and proclaiming. And when we share the good news, again, to last week's point with Bill Brown, evangelism is a part of this. And that's what we're doing every time we worship. We are proclaiming that relationship with and to and through the earth. I think that. Oh, there we go. And then next week, or the next time we meet, is with Cindy Brown. Do we have any questions in the next minute or two? We rifled through a lot of stuff today, everybody. That was amazing.
Great, thank you.
So I wasn't part of the one last week.
No problem.
Genesis 1, Genesis 2, Psalm 104, Proverbs, Job 38, and Ecclesiastes is only 6.
Yep, that's true. Did I say Isaiah 45 verses 11 through 19?
Isaiah.
No, yeah, we forgive me, I needed to move us along.
No,
So we only got to
fine.
7 of Bill Brown's pillars, but that is the 7th, or 6, excuse me, that is the 7th, if anyone wants to know. Isaiah 45 verse 11 through 19.
I just wanted to make sure the minutes.
No. And I mean, I will say one thing. Well, are there questions? How many of us have taken any of Larry's Bible classes? Hand in the air. So we all know about exile, and we all know about the many ways that through the life of the Hebrew people, they interpreted, reinterpreted, added color, added their own experience to these texts. And depending on where they were in that, and depending on how we read them, I think it's just fascinating to note the experiences that people had and how they continue to foster that relationship with creation, with nature. Again, there is no word in Hebrew for nature because it's not separate. It is part of just God's created order. And so you don't find that in anywhere in the Old Testament. You say, hey, they're out in nature. They're just in the wilderness or that sort of thing. Any questions before we end? Marty Link, thank you so much. Everyone else who's on, let's see here. Candace, Nancy, thank you so much. It's been wonderful to be with you all. I'm gonna end our video.
Yeah, thank you.